With the cemetery and the prison in Krugersdorp that I had previously mentioned, I actually forgot to mention some other details that I've just remembered. Now, with the cemetery, some of the stories that Cecilia would tell me regarding the supposed rituals that would take place there is that it was a very easy place and basically a place of convenience for those who were holding the ritual. Um, Simply because the people that were apparently sacrificed during the rituals, it was just easy for their bodies to be disposed of in the graves. And I did pose the question once to Cecilia, saying, but, wouldn't people notice that there was extra graves that were dug? And she would say to me that, no, they would simply dig open any of the current graves that were there and simply dispose of the bodies on top of the bodies that were previously there. So no one would basically be the wiser. And of course, with her saying this, it was, I can't even explain properly the look on her face or the tone of her voice. I just know that my stomach turns when I recall the look in her eyes and the expression that she had. It was plainly sadistic and plainly overall pleased with everything that she was talking about. It was something that made her happy and something that she was proud of. I still can't fathom, and I know most people, or the majority of people, can't fathom something like this being something you could be pleased with or satisfied with or proud of. But this is Cecilia Steyn we're talking about. And the other thing that she told me was that when they couldn't find someone to kidnap for the rituals, their last resort, or the alternative, was then just to dig up one of the bodies that was currently in one of the graves and use it for whatever ritual practice was going on at that specific time. The details were horrific with what they would do to a person's body, whether this person was, kidnapped or whether this person had been dug up. It was something out of a horror movie. I know that these were all just made up stories from Cecilia, but the way that her mind worked, the way that it thought out things, the way that it functioned, it was sick. It was twisted. She would go into gruesome details about how they would dismember different ligaments of a person's body, how they would use the person's blood. And even more than that, which was even worse, dare I even say worse, was that there was so much satisfaction in Cecilia's overall response when she would talk about how the people would scream while they were suffering and while they were being killed. And these people would also include children. She would even talk about babies that were killed. I am not going to go into any details about the specifics about how these people, children, and babies were supposedly killed because, well, simply, they were nonsense stories. But the way that she described it, it was sadistic. I don't think there's actually a proper word for it because it's beyond words. Even just at the fact that my stomach turns, just remembering the expression on her face and the tone of her voice and the look in her eyes. If my stomach turns at just that, can you imagine how bad the overall information was that Cecilia was portraying to me and to the other members of her group? And then to the other extreme, you're talking about the other vast extreme here. When Cecilia would talk about the prison shortly afterwards, it was a total contradiction of stories about the things that she was involved in. And like I had said in my previous audio, I don't know if any of the stories regarding Cecilia going to the prison was actually legitimate. But I can more than definitely say that the reason she would have been at the prison was definitely not the reason that she had told me. And there was only one time that I recall ever asking Cecilia, why on earth would you go to a prison? I mean, it's not someone's preferable place to visit, especially if you didn't actually know the people beforehand. Why would you want to go to a prison to visit random inmates? And she just simply replied with this smirk on her face and this look in her eyes. And she would casually just say to me, oh no, she goes there to minister to them and to counsel them. I mean, talk about a contradiction of events, a contrast of events. From one extreme, first going to a cemetery, talking about these gruesome events, to then not too much later, where she talks about going to minister and counsel to people who were in prison. That's a lot to take in. And yeah, I don't even know what to say to that, except for the fact that obviously Cecilia was not there to minister or counsel to anybody in prison. But in the same breath, I will also say that it might also be true if she had actually gone to the prison, because Cecilia was famous for basically ministering and counseling people. I mean, I had heard of countless relationships where she had counseled the couples and purposely ripped apart the relationship. She did this time and time again. And yet she also ordained, I know of at least one marriage that she had ordained. She was apparently, I think, a pastor, obviously ordained within her own right. But this was the way she would operate, basically, to anybody on the outside. She was this supposed good-hearted person who was kind and caring and counseling people and supposedly so concerned about you and trying to help you in whatever way, for whatever reason, only to ultimately then do a dramatic twist in order to use you, or if she couldn't use you, completely destroy you. So yeah, if she had actually gone to the prison, if she had actually counseled inmates there, it would have only to be for the purpose of using them for any of the crimes, or a vast number of the crimes that she'd been committing during the time that I knew her and even afterwards. Sadly, I mean, like I mentioned before, I only know of one person who was a known murderer who she had known, and she more than likely, I could be wrong, but she probably did visit him in prison because, I mean, he was at her house quite often when he wasn't in prison. So maybe that was the person that she visited. There was never a name mentioned. But she also used him to commit murders and who knows what else. But with these two extreme opposites, these two extreme examples or relaying of Cecilia's supposed past that she would tell me, there was, I must say, after much thought, there was at least some truth to both sets of information. Because even though at that point in time when I was being told this information, none of it, or maybe some of it, might have actually been true. But, I mean, when I look back, I don't know when Cecilia was actually capable of telling the truth. I mean, it was just ridiculous. Lying was easier for her than breathing. But later on, as time panned out, as the years panned out, the things that she had spoken of during my friendship with her, they ultimately ended up being the things that she was going to end up doing. I mean, the murders that she had spoken about, that she had supposedly committed when she was supposedly part of the occult, it was the same way, or ways, in which she had ended up murdering people years later. So there was some truth, eventually at least, to the things that she was saying. But at that moment in time when she was talking about the things, I I don't know how much truth was in any of it. There might have been. Like I said, she might have actually gone to the prison to basically befriend an inmate to then use later on. But as for everything else, yeah, lying was definitely easier for her than breathing. And the lies were beyond sadistic, beyond sick and twisted. I don't think if anyone had to ever make a horror movie regarding the specifics of the things that Cecilia said, even though she had taken a lot of this information from movies, I think if you had to combine everything that she had summed up or made up in her mind and then still exaggerated upon that, I don't think they would ever make a movie about it. I don't think it would ever be released because it is just too dark. It's just too sickening. And sadly, that is how her mind worked. And dare I even ask or think, was that just a taste of what her mind is like? Was it even worse than the things that she had said and what she had done? I mean, Cecilia was getting worse as time went on. So, my thought is perhaps she was still just getting warmed up. She was just getting started. So who knows what she could have still ultimately ended up doing if, she wasn't arrested, if she wasn't sentenced.